Hi, folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. Had a few wee technical problems this morning, so you might be hearing this for the second time. I don't know. We'll find out. We'll find out when we see the live show tomorrow, because we're recording this on Saturday, and we've all been up late watching the game last night, of course. But we're here bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and as they say, no prism, no politics. So let's get started. It's been a heck of a week, Eva. I'll come on to the Tartan Army later and all things about Scotland, of course, over there in North America. But it's very important that we start with the real politics stuff. And that was, we had some by-elections on both sides of the border. And the first thing to note is that if I go to the first one, which is, of course, the Aberdeen South, which was Stephen Flynn's seat, you know, they lost that to the Tories, their first victory in a by-election in 50 years. But it's the turnout, again, the apathy party, Eva.
Well, what's highly interesting is the fact that was it the mid-60s that the Tories last won a by-election in Scotland? And if you analyse how this came about, it doesn't take you long to figure out that it's the fault of the SNP. And it's the fault of the SNP because Stephen Flynn was allowed to stand for a seat in Holyrood. And that's why there is a Westminster by-election there. Now, quite apart from the amount of money that cost, he succeeded in losing an SNP seat at Westminster and thereby reduced the amount of money that the SNP will be entitled to get from Westminster for their short money. He's also succeeded in creating yet another rift within the SNP because there are very many people who are blaming him for the poor result. And the result is indeed extremely poor for dozens of reasons. It's a poor reflection on the independence movement, but when you analyse the figures, you'll see that the turnout was only 30-odd%, which is about half of what it should have been for the by-election. And the Tory, Douglas Lumsden, who won, got 14,300 votes. When Stephen Flynn stood there and took that seat a couple of years ago, he got 15,200 votes. This time, the SNP candidate, Richard Thompson, who's a former MP, only got 8,200 votes. And there were no other independent supporting candidates standing to split the vote, unless you consider that the Scottish Greens are independent supporters, which obviously we're highly sceptical about. The Green only got 974 votes. So there was a very, very clear message being sent to the SNP by the people of Aberdeen South, which was that they have lost faith in them. They don't trust them. And this is extremely sad for the independence movement generally, if you think that you need to keep the SNP as part of a united movement. But if your view is that the SNP are no longer focused on or driving for independence, then perhaps it's not so bad a result after all, subject to the caveat that if you're an independent supporter, under no circumstances do you want to see a Tory take a seat away from the SNP. So very, very poor show. Interested to see that since the result was announced, we've got that public spats now between senior members of the SNP, including a former special advisor who took to Twitter to, in essence, give Stephen Flynn a ticking off and blame him for this outcome. But, you know, there are a lot of people who would stick up for Stephen Flynn and say that he had a better idea than most, being an Aberdeen man, about the impact of the oil and gas problems that there are within the SNP policy. So there's a host of reasons why the SNP lost, but they didn't lose by a small margin. They were absolutely slaughtered. If you bear in mind, as I said, that they won it by a narrow margin, and they've lost it by over 6,000 votes. And perhaps that's because of oil and gas, people not having a just transition, arguments about how you define, let alone implement a just transition, whether or not there should be a just transition. And undoubtedly, it will also be because of this huge disconnect that there is now, and possibly getting wider, between support for the SNP and support for independence. And that underscores that the independence movement needs unity of purpose, and it needs to be driven along the lines that the Alliance to Liberate Scotland is, which is to be standing for independence, nothing less, and that's the immediate priority. So I look forward, unfortunately, in the course of the next few days and weeks to seeing what the short-term and long-term fallout and impact to this result is. I think there'll be a lot more infighting within the SNP, and they'll all be blaming each other. And let's wait and see whether or not there's a leadership challenge by Stephen Flynn against John Swinney for all the reasons that we enumerate every week.
Yeah, coming on to that. But two things I would say, should just make clear. Alliance to Liberate Scotland decided not to fight any of the by-elections in Scotland. They could have, but they didn't, because they were doing what they say in the tin, and we're giving the SNP a free run at it. You know, it's time. That's our, if you like, that's another form of unity, showing the unity. Time to show unity, Mr. Swinney, or your replacement. And the other thing I would just say, the gaming of the system, which we're told not to do, came back from Aberdeen South and down in Arbroath, but in Aberdeen, Reform and Labour were really only half-hearted. You know, they gave the Tories a free run because they'll do what they need to defeat the dreaded SNP and protect the union. And I also, the other thing, David, I take exception on is the oil and gas argument, because it's a reserved matter. It doesn't matter what the SNP or the Greens say about oil and gas. It's reserved to Westminster, and they're using it as a big stick to beat the SNP. You know, but they don't have actually a say over oil and gas.
I think part of the problem is that this conflation of powers that the general public seem to fall into. I mean, it's ironic, you know, if no galling, that the Conservatives have won, first time in 50 years, a by-election in Scotland, fighting it on oil and gas jobs. This is the Tories arguing against their own policies, because it was them that introduced the levies that the oil and gas companies are having to pay, this additional charge. Now, Labour have carried it on, you know, and you know there's a moratorium on new fields, etc. But it is sickening. You know, as someone who joined the SNP back in 1982, you know, after It's Scotland's Oil, to see the Tories trying to use that and use it effectively. Kemmy Badenoch being up 3 times in Aberdeen and pushing the point, because it's not just oil and gas jobs, it's specialities that come along with it, the engineering, subsea engineering. I think Jeff Aberdeen has a lot to say in the matter. You know, Aberdeen should be a hub for, you know, the undersea engineering, the power engineering that we're going to need in the next century. You know, off sea, the wind, wave generation, etc., and servicing that and building that resource up and being resilient. But that's not happening. Everything's pulling back out. I mean, you just have to look at Dundee and Ardseer and the amount of oil rigs that are coming in there to be decommissioned. So, you know, the investment's going out. Westminster aren't going to do anything to improve Scotland's situation. They're going to do anything to undermine an SNP government and our executive in Holyrood. We've seen that with the Chinese 1.5 billion investment being denied on sort of security issues, you know, because we all know that windmills are spying on everybody. But, you know, nuclear plants, Hinkley C, they're fine, and, you know, brand new embassies, super embassies. So it's really galling to anybody in the Yes movement, the independence movement, to sit and watch this. But it's John Swinney all over. And, you know, Flynn has got to take his share. These entitled, and that's how I see it. He stood for Westminster. He wanted to stand for Westminster. He became the party leader. And then he decided, much like Neil Gray and that in the past, oh no, I'll stand for Westminster, but next year I'll jump on another bus and go to Holyrood. Yeah. That's just taking the electorate for granted. Elections cost money. By-elections cost, the same amount of money for less participation. And it's a drain. It's a drain on the resources of many local authorities who have to conduct these for us. The internal fight not go on with the SNP, well, they've brought it upon themselves. They're the ones that keep handing sticks to the unionists to use, whether it's, the farce that's going on over the missing £660,000 or elsewise. And to think that, it's a bit rich. If this was a unionist party doing this, whether it be Tory, Labour, Liberal or whatever, we've all seen their scandals with funding in the past. And we got in with the sticks. Now they've got to do the same. And the Tories have absolutely rubbished the SNP. They took their nose and rubbed it in it, because the SNP vote fell by 50%, as Eva had pointed out. Flynn won that with 15,231 votes, and it's down to 8,200 odd under, was it Ross Thompson that was standing? So I don't know how they're going to view it. They'll be looking for somebody to blame, rather than themselves. The usual SNP hubris. They won't look in a mirror, they won't reflect on it, and they'll just carry on regardless. Yeah,
you're right. They give the sticks to the unions, and then when we point that out in places like Through a Scottish Prism, the SNP supporters attack us for being divisive when we say, well, it's your own fault. They don't want to hear it. And as to, there, Eva, David saying he joined the party in 1982, the SNP. See these Johnny come latelys, Just a newbie. But there was a couple of by-elections going, Terry, and the other one was down in Arbroath. And again, the thing that stuck out for me is that the vote was very small. It's a turnout of 30-odd%. The SNP held the seat quite dramatically with, if you just look at the bare figures. But the point is, again, the voters, and particularly the pro-independence voters, stayed at home. Absolute lethargy. Terry, you're on mute.
I have to say that I am the Jonah at this party. I have lost sound with everybody again, except for David, which is something. However, I have no idea what you just asked me, Roddy, which is not a good thing to be, not a good position to be in. But my thing on these election results isn't about the people, notwithstanding their personal ambitions or what they actually want. The results tell you something very clear in both these elections, both England and in Scotland. They're telling you that the electorate are totally cheesed off with whoever was in charge. In Aberdeen, the Tories get in. How in hell's name did the Tories get in? The Tories get in because there weren't enough people who voted Reform. There certainly weren't enough people who wanted the SNP back in, because they are absolutely cheesed off, scunnered to the back teeth. And in Makerfield, it was the same thing. The reason why they voted for Andy Burnham was because they thought, here's somebody who's going to take Starmer out. All you hear is about how awful Starmer is. He is a waste of space. That's all you hear from anyone who's interviewed. And he still says, no, I'm fighting on. I'm staying to the end. Well, the end is nice, son. Get your head around it. But the problem for us is in Scotland that the SNP have to do something about the way they're going on. The nonsense that they're continually pushing is wrong. They should be talking about independence, because that's what we want. They've forgotten that that's what we want. The majority of people who vote for the SNP do not want to listen to what's happening with Stephen Flynn or the two Baldy boys or whatever. we're not interested in that or trans things. We want independence, and then we can do something about it. So it's not about personalities as such, although they do come into it. That's the reason why it costs so much money, because they're wanting something. But it's about independence, and we should be doing that, and we should put in every effort that we have into it. We have a Tartan Army over there in America showing us that people all over the world love us because we're great folk, Scots. We're great folk who can't find their own way home. It's time for us to go home and have independence. And I'm going to go out and come back in again and hope that I can hear people again. So I'll see you in a couple of minutes after I've farted around with this computer. Bye.
Good old Terry, never lets us down. Well done. That's what you call perfect ad-libbing. Great. But she's mentioned there, Terry, Eva, the Macclesfield by-election. Now, the first thing to note is that there's a much higher, it's 60%, nearly double the turnout of the Arbroath and Aberdeen seats, where and it was a massive victory again, but it is personality, Andy Burnham, which is going to alert us to I would imagine a leadership contest down in England, because they want rid of Starmer. And also, just which brings me back to something you alluded to, and here's a quote from our Stephen Flynn on the result. He's now the Economy Secretary, responded to the loss of his old seat on social media by posting a tough night in Aberdeen that some will need to reflect on quite heavily. Obviously not him, he was saying. He should be as well. He added, we lost Aberdeen in 2017 and we won it back 2 years later. Don't worry about it, it'll be all right. Sorry. That smells to me of two things. Nothing to do with me, Gov. And he's going after Swinney's job. And down south, Starmer is going to have an attack. And just what the people in either side of the border don't need, these buggers playing at funny buggers with the leaderships when people can't put a plate and food on the table.
Exactly.
Well, sometimes what these politicians think they're saying isn't what they're really saying, because what he said there was, we'll win it back at the next Westminster general election. We're not supposed to be participating in the next Westminster general election because John Swinney guaranteed us a referendum, a Section 30 referendum indeed, which is not yet formally requested from the Prime Minister. And you'll have seen that there was news during the week where the SNP were trying to spin that it was uncertainty about Keir Starmer's future that was causing a problem with the timetable of that Section 30 request being made. Have you ever heard such guff? Well, yeah, you have, because you've heard it over and over again for the SNP in the last few years. So, yeah, a leadership bid looked likely because that's why we all thought that Stephen Flynn was heading to Holyrood anyway. But now that result has dented the SNP's position, I don't think that leadership bid by Stephen Flynn is now as imminent as it might have seemed, because he has clearly lost the support of some very influential people, given the nature of the criticism that's been levelled against him. So he and his troops are going to have to round up the support that he thought he had, shore up that support, and then reassess whether he's actually in a position to take the leadership from John Swinney or otherwise. And then you get into the realms of what are the constitutional arrangements of the Scottish National Party and of being First Minister. How does a leadership bid come about? How many people need to support you? How many members from how many branches or constituencies have to get behind you before you can even qualify to make that bid, let alone win it? So I think that Stephen Flynn's road, or his route to the crown, if you like, has just become a bit longer, a bit more winding than he anticipated. And then you look at Andy Burnham, and I thought, does he think he's Robert the Bruce? Is he sitting there in a wee cave with a spider? If at first you don't succeed, try and try and try again. Now, the arrogance of the man, he tried twice and he didn't win twice. And he walked away from Westminster to become the mayor of Manchester. And I don't know how great a job he's done there, but he obviously gets plaudits from some people for some achievements, so he must have got something right somewhere. But the absolute brass neck to get somebody to stand down to create a by-election for him, costing the country money, just like Stephen Flynn and Stephen Gethens did. But the brass neck of doing that with the sole intention of getting his backside behind that desk in number 10 shows you that he's in it for self-interest as well. Because if he was in it for the Labour Party, if he was in it for the country, he'd be making moves behind the scenes to promote his party, albeit, you know, we don't like the Labour Party, obviously, but he'd be promoting his party. He would be taking all steps possible to maintain unity within the Labour Party, not driving a coach and horses right through what is already very, very messy. And all of this is a diversion. It takes people's eyes off the ball. Bad metaphor this week, but it does. People are talking about who's going to be the leader, who's going to be the Prime Minister. The news this morning has moved on slightly from the by-election results to will Keir Starmer announce this weekend that he's going to stand down and trigger a leadership contest. What bloody difference will it make to the people of Scotland if it's Keir Starmer or Andy Burnham or any other? We should not have to rely on Westminster to secure the chosen destiny of the people of Scotland. We should be able to rely on the Scottish politicians who were elected to achieve that very aim, proceeding with that plan. But judging on recent results, the SNP they've been sent homeward to think again, actually, from Aberdeen South. And not only do they need to think again, they need to listen to people that know what they're talking about. You quoted Stephen Flynn there saying that there had to be reflection or what have you. What was absolutely pathetic is that's clearly the line that he's put out to his supporters, because one of his fan club, Jack Middleton, who was elected an MSP just this year, having risen up gloriously and magnificently through the ranks of, you know, T-boy to intern to spad and what have you, he tweeted, "It's the Tories' night in Aberdeen South, but SNP support remains strong throughout the city." Sorry, no, son, no, it doesn't. And his final line of his tweet, "I look forward to winning it back for the SNP in 2029. They're all at it. They're all talking about winning for the SNP at Westminster in 29. To what end? They had 56 out of 59 in 2015 and did hee-haw. So this time, for the next election, the people of Scotland have got to think ever more carefully perhaps than ever before, about where it is that they put that cross, or if it's a Scottish parliamentary election, those crosses.
Yeah, it is. It's quite bizarre. I mean, but it's media hype. The media have been wanting rid of Starmer and talking up Andy Burnham as the new great white hope. It's all the same, David. It looks to me like we're going to get two leadership contests on both sides of the border. Do you think that will be likely, or do you think it's going to happen?
Well, the reports are that Starmer's taken this weekend to think it over. But again, it's a case of, what is the point? What are you getting out of replacing Keir Starmer with Andy Burnham? Because the both, to me, seem to follow the same neoliberal agenda. Yep. Their positions on Israel are the same.
Ukraine.
And it's I heard the joke through the week, a Blairite, a Brownite and a Corbynist walk into a pub and the barman says, "What you having, Andy?" And that's the position. No one knows what Andy Burnham really is all about, because he's been in every sort of grouping within the Labour over the last 20, 25, 26 years. So he's flitted with him. I know they seem to think he's more left-wing, because he's the mayor in Manchester, and I don't see any real difference. There's no difference for Scotland, because he has said very much like Keir Starmer, West Streeting, that there will be no Section 30, which is great for an Englishman to decide what the constitutional arrangement will be for the sovereign people in Scotland. But policy-wise, is it going to cut the benefits so that the warmongers can buy some ships that actually work, buy some infantry fighting vehicles that actually work and don't injure disable the soldiers travelling in them? There's a lot of problems within the UK, and I don't really see changing the rider of the horse at this point doing any real benefit. The problem is the horse, which they're riding on, is being flogged. As for Scotland, what would Flynn bring? He was leader in Westminster. He's followed the policies. He signed the agenda letter. So he's confined. Signed up to the same sort of agenda as John Swinney when it comes to inequalities, the trans issues. He signed a letter with another 62 SNP MSPs. So he's tied in that. He supported the free ports, which, as another right-wing policy. What's he got to do different? I don't see any difference. I mean, there has to be a root and branch review within the SNP, and I don't think changing another leader, 4 leaders within 3 years, is going to help the SNP. They'll just carry on the way that have done before, because in order for Flynn to make a substantial change, it would mean getting rid of more than half the members within the Parliament. He hasn't come out with any kind of statements on reviewing or renewing the party. They keep quoting that the membership has increased and donations have increased, but we're talking about a party that's went from 125,000 members in sort of 2015, 2016, and they're now barely above 40,000. So there's 80-odd thousand members left the SNP in a 10-year period. So what they've got to do to bring your people like myself and that back? That price is too high for them. They're not going to do it, because it means looking yourself in the mirror and saying, right, we've been wrong. We've been lying to the people. They're just there. To me, it's just, as I've said, it's carry on regardless. His agenda will be to maintain, maybe to extend the powers of devolution. I heard Ben McPherson say that about power, trying to get power, energy policy devolved to Holyrood. You're just playing Westminster's game. You're not a nationalist. You're a devolutionist. You're no better than a Tory. Actually, the one thing about the Tory winning in Aberdeen is he'll probably talk about independence more in Westminster than any of the SNP group have done for a decade anyway. That's the one thing that we forget. Holyrood and Westminster really only hear about independence via the whinging and the moaning of the Conservative and Labour. You don't really hear it from the SNP. Jamie Hepburn in his wee room, supposedly coming up with a policy which never transpired. We're now on number 6, I believe, of Section 30 orders. It was not back. I don't see anything coming up in Parliament. We know how if they were truly an independent supporting party, they'd be laying down a measure to be voted on to amend the Scotland Act, and to cut that from a 2/3 majority to a simple majority. Alex Salmond spelled it all out, showed them the way. It was there to be used. You've got to be aggressive. You can't be passive. And, when it comes to policies, the SNP under Swinney is passive. He prefers to save his aggression for stabbing people in the back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the thing, Terry. For a start, your man Andy Burnham's no Mandani, as in the Mayor of New York. And, what they do, I really couldn't care less about. But up in Scotland, shouldn't Stephen Flynn, instead of having a tilt at John Swinney, be pushing John Swinney and the rest and saying, we promised a constitutional convention to the people. We need to do that. We need to get unity and get the 8, 9, 10,000 people in my seat that stayed at home. The way to do that is surely through a constitutional convention, unity and unity of purpose, as we preach here every week, Terry. And I'm hoping that you can hear me now.
I can hear you. It's wonderful. I can hear everybody. I'm so happy. You've no idea.
Otherwise, I was in trouble there.
No, I would have been lip reading, I'll tell you that much. I'm going to put this very succinctly. And I'm going to talk about England and Scotland and the leaders of both. The leaders of both. The championship that's going to happen soon between them. You've got Starmer and you've got Burnham. Two cheeks of the same Jacksie.
Yep.
You've got Swinney and Flynn, which, if you put both of these together, they look like the same Jacksie. So the thing is that's it. There's nothing to choose from between these people. They are all the same. They are politicians who are after prestige and everything that they can get. They're not interested in standing up for the people. If they were interested in standing up for the people, they would have done it by now, particularly Swinney. He's been around for 150 years, that man, and he's still going strong. Well, strong, that's a lie. I made that up. He's still going. And he's still going and driving me around the twist for a start. I have it in for Swinney. I can't help it. Mm-hmm. I really can't help it. But where do we get off with this? We talk about unity all the time. It's not, how can we unite when we have the SNP being brainwashed on a daily basis? Even the ones who saw that things were going wrong still think it's all fixed now. It's all fixed. It's all right. We've got Flynn now. He's going to make everything different. He's not going to make anything different. He looks like him for a start, and he behaves like him. So why is it going to be any different? He's got the same policies. He's got the same bosses, which is probably the most important bit. The big bosses who decide what happens in politics. The people who should be deciding what happens in politics are you and I and my cousin and my son and the Waynes round the corner. We're the people who should be deciding what happens to Scotland. All those people that are over in America now cheering and singing the Flower of Scotland, they should be deciding what happens to Scotland. And that should be, as we all know, independence and nothing less. Nothing ever, ever less. Let's go for that. Instead of worrying about these twits.
Absolutely. But the problem is that these politicians of all parties in all countries, but in all parties, they live in their own wee bubble and they won't come out that bubble. They talk about, you're in a social media bubble. Perhaps we are, but they're in a bubble and they won't see any change. They don't want to hear about anything that's different. They just keep believing what they're saying and thinking is right. And they don't ever turn around and go, whoa, we made a mistake. And I've said this a few times. If they did, you would get more response from the public because the public can accept mistakes. What they can't accept is all the lies that's going on, Eva. And it came out, actually, this survey this week, which leads me on carefully to the next topic I'm coming up with, which is that trust in news with the mainstream is at a new low. They don't trust, and is it any wonder, Eva, that we know that they lie to us, to our faces, and some of them are just so blatant about it. It's not true. This week we had a classic example of it. They were trying to tell us. We know that the rent boys from Ukraine were in court, and they were found guilty. Two of them, one got away with it, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But these we're being told, and all the media are clicking in on it and telling us, well, these are Russian agents. Now, I would just like to say, Eva, irrespective of what you think of the Russians, the Israelis, the British, the Americans are probably the four best secret services. They've been going going back to Tsarist times in Russia. They apparently managed to sneak in some plutonium into the UK and poison a guy, a Russian dissident. They've done all sorts of, but they employed two rent boys with a box of matches and give them the wrong address, and they go in arsonist Keir Starmer's back door, and we're to believe that they were sent by big bad Putin, and they wonder why we don't trust them anymore.
I would strongly imagine that if Putin or those around him wanted to do something to damage either the security or the reputation of the British Prime Minister, they would have a lot more efficient ways of going about it. They're not that stupid. But you were asking about trust, say trust in politicians, trust in the media. This week, while we've been talking about, or while we've been preoccupied with by-elections, obviously football, there's an awful lot of other things that have been flying under the radar because that suits the politicians and it suits the media at times. And one of the things that has very much flown under the radar is that this week the Poverty and Inequality Commission report was released. And it says very plainly, this is for Scotland only, this study by a fairly well qualified group of people says that the Scottish Government's targets to reduce child poverty by 2030 are being missed. And the report gives you statistics about just how badly we're doing. There is an acknowledgement that some things have contributed to some improvements in the numbers, but basically they're still shamefully bad. So if you say, what is Nicola Sturgeon's legacy? The first thing that trips off the tongue is Baby Box. That has, in fact, had a limited positive impact. The child poverty, or sorry, the child payment has had a positive impact, but again, limited. And when you look at the reality of this is where the general public, the electorate, gets so cheesed off with politicians, because in the main, politicians are out of touch. And it all buys into and it ties into, why do you elect the people that you do? You elect them to represent you because you think that they represent your values, you think they share your values, and particularly in Scotland, if you voted for the SNP, it was because you thought that they would achieve independence or have a damn good try at achieving it, and along the way they would be addressing inequality, because that word inequality is on the lips of every Scottish politician, especially those who support independence, but they're failing to tackle inequality properly. So the executive summary that is attached to that report narrates the statistics, explains what should happen next, which is what the people in this commission have been saying forever. And their final line in the executive summary is, not meeting these targets is not fate. It is a choice whose costs are paid by children every day in the essentials they go without and in the opportunities they are denied. It's stuff like that that should be front page news. It's stuff like that that Stephen Flynn and John Swinney should be answering to, rather than all the other stuff where we know they've squandered money. And I'm sure you'll come on to the For Women Scotland case later.
Indeed, we are, yes.
It's about priorities, and the priorities of the SNP are currently skewed, and the priorities of the Westminster government are similarly skewed for different reasons and in different directions. But that is predominantly why turnout is low, voter apathy is high, And so many folk turn on the telly, it's the news, it's a politician, and they switch off, or they're over to Netflix or Amazon Prime because they can't thole it any longer. And quite frankly, no bloody wonder.
No, you're absolutely right. But it's dishonesty, David. We encourage it every day. But here's what's actually happening. They were trying to tell us, and it's the usual suspects. But this is from Commander Helen Flanagan, the head of counter-terrorism and policing in Scotland, about the attacks on Starmer and his back door. We've got no evidence to suggest that this was a state-backed threat. But the usual suspects who are telling us, David, that there is no genocide in Palestine, that the Ukraine Nazis are not really Nazis, that Scotland is too poor, too weak and too stupid. The usual suspect, like Alistair Campbell of the dodgy dossier, is promoting this. It's the Russians, it's the bad Russians, the Reds under the bed. They really do treat us like fools.
I think the whole suspicious element of this is the lack of coverage by the mainstream media, the BBC, the Times, the Telegraph. Where were they? I mean, this is supposed to have been an attack, or several attacks, on Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and yet, they're trying to equate this with being funded by a Russian individual called El Money, and trying to, smear it as a Russian-backed, organised campaign. The thing that, bothers me is, why would you use, as you've said, rent boys or male models, young? Why would they attack in such a way? Why have they been charged that way rather than, the Palestinian Action members who were done under the Terrorist Act, but for doing very much similar sorry, my mind's gone. Actions, the same, they went in, they destroyed property, they vandalised property. These young guys have done the same, and, they've basically been charged with willful damage, etc. It just shows that there is something fishy and strange going on here. The fact that, this happened over a period of, years ago, and is only now coming to the Old Bailey. And, if it wasn't for independent journalism, that we wouldn't really hear anything about it, other than, the mainstream media picking up on the judgment of the court and finding them guilty. I think there's a whole lot of things going on here that, again, we the public are not allowed to look at, to be curious about, and wonder what's going on. What is the role in Keir Starmer? How is he actually involved in this? Why was he the target of the actions of these? Well, I believe originally it was 5 young men. 2 have been found guilty. One's still being investigated, and no charges were brought against the other. And they're not all Ukrainian. I believe one was Romanian as well. So, there's something strange, but should we,
sure.
should we be surprised? No. It's just a typical distraction, whitewash. I don't know if there was an order put in place to limit, or I know it had been put about that Starmer had taken out a super injunction. Whether that's true, I don't know. It's one of these things that the facts are deeply buried under layers of whitewash, that conspiracies can grow quite easily because of it. But we're none the wiser. To think that this is an act of the Russian state, no. This is the act of it's a vengeance thing. Somebody's been done a wrong, and they've used these young chaps to try and get back for whatever reason they have.
Yeah. The two things. I remember, if you remember, it broke at first. There's a quote I've got here. Keir Starmer said that Ukrainian Roman Lavrovich, I don't know if I've pronounced that right, who set fire to his house, arsoned his back door, was not a rent boy, but a Ukrainian refugee he played cards with. Really? Believe that if you like. But here's what came from the lawyer, one of the lawyers, Terry, on the case. And you said, I was the leading defence counsel for Pochnik, who was acquitted, having come across your video. I remember seeing the public gallery every day. Even as a defence barrister in the trial itself, I still find my head pickled over what really underlying truths were never exposed, because the judge would not allow them to bring into evidence what was their motivation, what was the reason they had done this. Completely bizarre. The public were kept out of the trial. Something, stinks.
I found David's telling us who the supreme mind behind all this was called Il Money. He sounds more like a Spanish footballer than any sort of Russian to me. But what a mastermind! Here's a box of matches, boys. Go round and set fire to something. And the boys, one of them got off with it. Now, was it the boy who looked as if he could handle himself in a fight, or was it the pretty boy that got off with it? That's a question I'd like. I don't know which one it was that got off with it. But the thing is, why would the Russians, Putin, who's a very, very clever man, why would he want to send a couple of rent boys round with a box of matches to deal with Keir Starmer? Is Keir Starmer a threat to Putin? I don't think so. I don't think he's a threat. I don't even think he's a threat to Andy Burnham, right? I don't think he's a threat at all. It's all nonsense. It's all made up nonsense. It's every day we get all this cacatoli about the bad Russians. Oh, the bad Russians. The good Ukrainians. Zelensky, don't get me started on him. You think I hate Swinney? Wait till I start on Zelensky. These people are beyond thinking about at the minute. So why is it that Putin is always the bad guy? China is always the bad guys. They're even worse, the Chinese. Why this propaganda that we're constantly being fed, and then they put up two young lads, pictures in the papers, these evil boys set in motion by the bad Russians to damage Keir Starmer. I could damage Keir Starmer worse. That's a fact. I could actually, yes, I could do him a real damage. But it's nonsense. It's propaganda. And it's typical of our mainstream media. It's typical of our BBC. It's typical of all the people who are in it to push us in certain directions, to hate this one and to love that one. Why can't we just look at the facts and decide for ourselves?
Because it would bring it the whole deck of cards piling down if they started telling the truth. That's the bottom line. But if the reason there's no trust, there's this case come through as well, Eva, this week, a Brighton woman. Now, this is a woman, irrespective of what you think on what side you take on what's going on in Palestine. She was writing to her member of parliament, and she expressed her concerns about what she viewed as a genocide happening in Palestine, and expressed to her member of parliament, who's her representative after all, to do something about it. He reported her to the police for being annoying and sending him emails that were threatening behaviour. She was arrested at 4:30 in the morning. The plods arrived to arrest her. For almost a year, she was under a cloud. She got acquitted in minutes when she went to court. This, when you can't go to your own member of parliament without him grassing you into the police for something as trivial as writing an email because he didn't like it, because he's funded by the Labour Friends of Israel. One, it says no more funding. We should get rid of all this funding from outside. And two, isn't it terrible you can't go to your MP and make a complaint?
Well, you know, in common with the experiences of many of the women in the Women Won't Wish campaign, the process is the punishment. That's why she was lifted at 4:30 in the morning, to terrify her, and pour encourager les autres. That old phrase. Can I slightly rewind, though, Roddy, to the issue about Keir Starmer and this recent prosecution that we were talking about there? Isn't it fortuitous that the trial ended just about the same time as the by-election for Andy Burnham? Because yet again, there was another little smokescreen there that was able to be used. I mean, it's not as if dates for by-elections and dates for trials are known in advance or anything like that, if anybody wanted to engineer or manipulate a set of circumstances. But because folk are talking about what was that trial all about, what really went on, perhaps if what might be a version of the truth became public knowledge, Keir Starmer would have no alternative but to fall upon his sword. So maybe there is an awful lot more to this than meets the eye, and there is a plan that Keir Starmer steps aside, and whatever scandal there is that has not yet become public knowledge will be swept under that Axminster yet again. In terms of the woman who's not allowed to email her MP, I understand, if my memory serves me correctly, that there was nothing threatening or abusive in her emails. It was the fact that she sent quite a few emails that led to the prosecution. So this is not unlike the carry-on in Holyrood during the week when John Swinney denies that it was him, but somebody in the Parliament or in the parliamentary body decided to pen the media so that journalists are no longer able to pursue MSPs if they want to get an answer from them. It's not unlike that. We elect these people and we expect them to be accountable. Once they're elected, they'll decide who and what and when they're going to answer what are not unreasonable inquiries. You know, the absolute opposite of what we're entitled to expect is delivered by our politicians. We want answers, we want accountability, we want honesty, and everything flips on its head and you're tarred as a criminal for asking questions, or in the case of the media, they close you down because they didn't want to talk to you because they don't like being asked awkward questions that they're expected to answer.
Yeah, but that is a fact, isn't it, David? When they get elected, every politician, every party, they turn around and say, and I will be doing for all of my constituents, and, you know, I will work my little bottom off. And yet they do not like to be asked the awkward questions. They want to be given softball questions every time. They don't like it, the truth.
No, and you know, when you look into this case and see what the woman was charged, as stated in the charge, that persistent misuse of a communication system to cause annoyance and inconvenience or needless anxiety. So if you're persistent in something, that is now a crime. That's something. That's really. It's, you know, it's a snowflake society. You know, people, you know, will now rush to charge you if you know, you hurt their feelings. It's ridiculous that we've got to this state. And the fact of the matter is that the man is paid. He's a friend of Israel, so no doubt he's been funded by Israeli money. There's a massive conflict of interest at the heart of it, and it's at his heart. He's the problem. I think it now should be when they declare that you know, in Parliament and in Holyrood anywhere, as a councillor, if we had anything like that, we had to declare it and step aside. We were not supposed to take part in any debates or any votes which could be influenced by that conflict. And I think that has to happen here. Too many times now we're seeing MPs and MSPs taking jollies from interest bodies. And to me, you know, anything that they will look at or deal with in the Parliament is skewed by this bias, because they've took tens of thousands of pounds. The other thing it touches on this aspect is, the situation we now find ourselves in. We saw the witch hunt against Corbyn because of his supposed anti-Semitism. And the fact now is that it's almost criminal now for anybody, for the man in the street, to criticise Israel, to criticise the actions of Israel, of any state asset of Israel. It's absolutely ridiculous that in this day, Britain's supposed to be all about justice, justice for all, and yet that justice will come down on you if you criticise Netanyahu for his genocide, Netanyahu for the war crimes that are being committed. We've got 2,000 British members of IDF who took part in the campaign within Gaza, yet no action has been taken against them and have any of them been investigated?
Nope.
Yet we have a silly lassie who went to join ISIS. Didn't do anything. Didn't carry.
She was groomed as a child.
Groomed as a child. 15-year-old went over there, and now they've withdrawn her nationality, withdrawn the passport. She can't come back home. And yet we have the potential of 2,000 members of our 2,000 UK citizens who went out to Gaza and took part in actions which could potentially be deemed war crimes. And nothing is done about it. And we have people like Mr. Kyle rounding on a constituent for raising pertinent and serious issues about what is happening in Gaza. A Labour Party who, will constantly tell you they're all for human rights, but obviously that doesn't include if you're a Palestinian, you have no rights. Israel trumps all. He's bought and paid for. He's an agent of Israel. And to me, there should be a charge from the Crown against him for wasting police time. He should be charged in that and fined to cover the cost of that, because the judge or the magistrate who dismissed the case, I believe, is pretty right wing. Whether he was told to drop it because, as Eva pointed out, there was a by-election going on and didn't want any more negative media coverage, but he dropped it and he awarded costs for the women. So it says a lot about this farce of a case.
Yeah, there's no chance of him being charged with anything. There's more chance of me getting a season ticket for Parkhead for next season than there is of him getting charged with anything. In other words, no chance. But that's the thing, Terry. They talk about, they wonder why there's no trust. And then, as I say, you go to your member of parliament, next minute you're getting lifted at 4:30 in the morning for asking, as David points out, pertinent questions. Whether he agrees with them or not is not the point. They're pertinent questions. She's not been abusive. She's not been threatening. But he doesn't agree with her position. Fine. But he should at least have answered her, not had her arrested.
Apparently, she was actually only charged with 2 emails, and then they added another 2 on during the trial. I want to know why I haven't been taken out and hung, drawn and quartered, because for about 4 years I wrote every single week complaining to my local Tory MP. We became pen pals. Seriously, every week without fail, I wrote for about 4 years, until eventually he won. He won because I gave up, because he was unrelentingly charming and polite and nice to me. So I thought, oh, to hell with this. This is a waste of space. There's no fun in this. But not that long ago, my friend wrote to him to complain about Gaza and what was going on there and all this. And, you know, and he wrote back the most appalling thing that had everybody I know in fury, absolute fury, about how we should be proud of what's happening. Proud. I'm sorry. And Netanyahu suddenly, he's trying to create peace in the Middle East. What, is a trans peacenik now? Is that what's happened? I know you can be trans anything nowadays because you can't be offensive to anyone who's trans. So he's a trans peacenik in my view. Trump's another one. Dear God. Writing to your MP and being arrested. That's beyond a joke. That shows you how far away they are from the people who voted them in. No. If they can't acknowledge the people who voted them in and give them the time of day, what in hell's name are they there for?
Correct.
They're not serving the people. They're only serving themselves. And that's the problem. They are all self-serving. They're all only interested in how much money they're going to get, how they're going to achieve it, how they're going to achieve the status. Nobody you hear these days talks about how are we going to fix things for kids in school? How are we going to fix things for pensioners? How are we going to fix things for this, that, the other? You don't hear that. You hear it occasionally from somebody who's a do-gooder. Yeah. A do-gooder. Why is it a do-gooder is considered to be a bad thing? Oh, he's just a do-gooder. Why is that a bad thing? Somebody who does good is surely a good thing. But politicians, oh, let's give them loads of money and fall about, have pictures taken with them smiling. No more. No more of it.
Yep. That's the problem.
The end of my capabilities.
The problem we have now down in Westminster is I'll use a Scottish phrase, but our politicians in Westminster have been bought and sold for Tel Aviv gold. That's the reality. Absolutely. Yes. But time's going on, and there's a couple of things I want to get in, Eva, and just quickly on this one with yourself. This week, we couldn't let it go by, but the For Women Scotland, who, again, the Scottish government lost again, and it's now up to about £1 million, and they're still not doing what they've been told by the Supreme Court to do.
That case should never have had to be brought, but thank goodness for the women in For Women Scotland who took it to all their supporters, including Murray Blackburn Mackenzie, Women Won't Wheesht, a multitude of organisations and individuals, prominent people who stuck their neck out long, long ago, including Rona Hotchkiss, whom we've had on the show, I think, before, Roddy, and Kate Coleman, who was Keep Prison Single Sex. They were all in the vanguard of what's been a far too long and terrible, expensive fight that's also taken a human toll. There's been a human cost as well as a financial cost. But what is utterly and completely disgraceful about this is that the vulnerable women who are now going to have to go through the motions, instruct solicitors and apply for compensation for the simple fact that for over a decade, the Scottish Prison Service has been breaking the law. But the government, the prison service, will wait for these women to come forward. And then you've put it there, Linda Pollock is now the Chief Executive of the Scottish Prison Service, having been recently promoted. She was previously the Deputy Chief Executive. So I think she'd given evidence in one of these cases, so had her predecessor. But you'll see that her release to all the staff of the prison service yesterday, when the decision was issued by the Court of Session, was to say in the plainest of terms, the court has decided that we've been behaving unlawfully. In other words, the Scottish Prison Service, an arm of the Scottish Government, has been breaking the law. It's official. But what's the finale? We'll carefully consider the implications of the judgment, but there'll be no change to our admissions policy meantime. In other words, we don't have a contingency plan. Were they so arrogant that they expected to win? Were they badly advised that they expected to win? Did they seriously believe that the highest court in the land was going to sanction mixed sex prisons, which is what women's prisons become if you house trans-identifying males there? So there are a number of highly qualified lawyers, far more qualified than I am, commenting on Twitter right now about how ill-advised that release from the Scottish Prison Service is, because it's an admission of fault followed up by a very plain notice that there will be no change meantime. There is nothing to consider. You know, a judge in the Court of Session, the highest court in Scotland, has said, not quite in words of one syllable, but in the plainest of languages, that this is unlawful. So a judge should not then have to tell you to stop it. The judge should expect that when the decision has been issued, the unlawful conduct comes to an end. Now, as if that wasn't bad enough, John Swinney, who'd be part of those who were instructing the lawyers to challenge for Women's Scotland's case, he's the man who said that the Scottish Government will follow the decision of the Supreme Court that sex means biological sex and you can't change your sex, you're either male or female. He's consistently and steadfastly asserted and said, you know, let me be very clear about this. And you know when he says that, he's going to be anything but. But let me be very clear, we respect the decision of the Supreme Court. They've not actually implemented the decision of the Supreme Court. And yesterday, when John Swinney was asked about this decision of the Court of Session, he said, in essence, it's a complicated judgment. We'll have to take time to consider what it says, what it means, and what the implications are. A wee bit of free advice. It's complicated insofar as it's complex, and there's a lot of law there, but the bottom line is, you can't have mixed sex prisons. So you have prisons for men and you have prisons for women. And if there's a difficulty for the Scottish Prison Service with people who are trans, then they can have separate facilities in a prison of their sex, for their sex, because it's about sex, not gender. And while I'm at it, can I suggest that the Scottish Legal Aid Board review the advice that they put out? I think that was yesterday as well. They've given advice to lawyers like me who do legal aid applications for clients. And they've actually said today in 2026, when it comes to the question, because they do, you know, these equality things, all this stuff, when you're saying to the client, what is your sex? You can answer male, female, or prefer not to say. But if you're transgender, the answer you give can be different from what is on your birth certificate. If you're non-binary or you're not sure how to answer, you could use the sex registered on your official documents, such as your passport. But a gender recognition certificate doesn't change your sex. So your sex will always be what it was when you were born, because it can't change. So to see that the Legal Aid Board in Scotland, another arm of the Scottish Government, are persisting with that at this very, very late stage of the game is extremely disappointing. I'll probably get reported for this now, but we'll take that when it comes.
The question when it's sex, it should be I know or occasionally. That should be the answer to that question.
Could I
You want to say something? Absolutely. On you go, Terry.
This is a wee happy story to end my bit with. Right, I'm going to show you. Yesterday, because of this this result, I was wearing this. Okay. So I was out and about wearing this all day. And at 5 o'clock, when I got back to the house, I needed milk. So I stopped off at the local co-op. And I went in, and it was just after 5, and it was absolutely hotching with men. It was like walking into a swamp of pheromones and testosterone. And these men had lots and lots of Scotland things on, and they were all in buying beer. Imagine that. What a turn up. So when I came in with this on, they went, all right, go on your cell, hen, thinking that I was you know, football crazy. I am now, actually, but that's beside the point. Football mad. And I went, oh no, it's about something else. And they went, oh, like that? Really? And when I came out, there were 3 or 4 of them standing. And they said, what was it about then, Hen? And I told them, and they went, oh, yeah, that's rare. Bloody brilliant. Good on you, women. And I thought that was worth walking through hundreds of men for just for that moment. Glorious.
Yeah.
Power to the girls.
Absolutely. And which brings me, Kev, a great segue there, David, to bring me on, because one of the great things that's been happening, we've all been following what's going on over the pond, and we were all watching the game last night, etc. But I think people need to understand what great soft power this has been by our boys. And I mean, some of the things have been absolutely hysterical. I mean, to get word through that in Boston, which is a big Irish community in America, they've drunk more in one weekend than they do in a 4-day St. Paddy's Day holiday. That you know, there's stories that there've been bars all over Boston running out of drink, but there's not been any harm. They've been cleaning up after themselves in parks. They were in a big park having a march. You maybe saw it. They cleaned their place up after them. The people of Boston and Massachusetts and all America have fallen in love with Scotland. It's going to have so much positive output for Scotland. It's just not true. But here's the thing. Back in Scotland, Midlothian Council decided in their wisdom that it would be offensive to display Scotland flags during the World Cup, or for members of staff to turn up wearing a Scotland top, because someone might get offended. We're our own worst enemy, David.
Yes, the interesting thing about that is Midlothian, I believe, is an SNP council.
Yeah.
Kerry Parry,
SNP,
NEC member. I think they put out their excuse after the fact. I don't think it was anything to do with the councillors on this. I think this was a
the chief executive.
decision.
Chief executive.
Yes. We had this before North Lanarkshire as well, fighting over flags, what's right to display, and members were told not to have, saltires in case they, offended anyone. Which, it's again, it comes back to this snowflake society. You're not allowed to offend anybody. People, it isn't a right. We don't have a right not to be offended. If we don't like something, then we turn away from it. It's not been done deliberately to target people. And, it's ridiculous that one is, denied the right of self-expression. And if that's during a World Cup, to, show support for your team and for your country, it just shows the small-mindedness of the chief executive and anybody else who would sort of endorse this. I also saw that there was a street in Edinburgh as well where the neighbours got together, and it wasn't about we're proud to be, the right-wing thing that Farage and that were promoting. They got up and they put the saltires up and all the lampposts, etc. And it was solely for the World Cup. But the council come round the next day and started taking them down, which beggars belief. I can see the point if they're being used to intimidate people. The situation that we've had over in Belfast recently, where they're kicking doors in if your skin's the wrong colour, or they believe you're this, that, and the next thing. It shouldn't be used to intimidate. If it's used to celebrate what's going on, then 100% we should get behind it. Anybody who's small-minded enough to do this, they're doing harm to the council or the body that they represent in doing this. People have the right to express their beliefs. We live in a society that is becoming intolerant of that right. whether we like it or not. And it's not just at football, it's across the whole spectrum. But we should be out there enjoying it. As you said, Roddy, you know, the Tartan Army went over there. They're doing what they do best. They go, they enjoy the money that they've given to local hospitals and charities over there. They've drank Boston dry. Well, that's Boston's fault because they were told that we were coming. There's years and years, you know, they just have to look back at Germany. Now, Germany is one of the best countries in the world for beer, and we still drank them dry.
We did.
So
I was guilty.
So they knew it was coming. You know, so hopefully by the time they get to Miami, the message will have got there, and they'll have a fresh shipment of tenants and McEwen's brought in for them. But no, well done to them. You know, Scottish tourism in the next 2-3 years will receive a boost because of this. Americans have still got money. Fair enough, a lot of people aren't going to America on holiday anymore due to Ken Donald, but they're more than welcome to come over here. The problem we've got is being able to facilitate them. You know, the North Coast 500 really needs a lot of, you know, money for Holyrood to put sustainable infrastructure in, not only for the tourists but for the locals who, you know, are being affected by the large amount. But well done to them.
Yeah, absolutely. They've done a great job. The other thing that will be boosted, actually, I would think, would be the population of Massachusetts in the next 9 months. They had, I don't know if you saw the one. They had a dating show with 1,000 women from from New England were looking for boyfriends, and they invited the Tartan Army along. I thought, oh, you silly girls, you really. I don't know. But the other one, the two things we should also make. They donated 30,000. It's unique to the Scottish Tartan Army. Wherever they go, they donate money to charities and children's hospitals, etc. Underprivileged kids playing football. $30,000 they raised and have donated to New England charities. But my favourite story of the whole week was they were just like the Terry there. They were in an offie, and a woman came in and ordered 2 bottles of water, and 20 Scotsmen booed her immediately for buying water, which I think just sort of sums it up. Yeah, well done, the Tartan Army.
The one that I thought was really funny was them all standing outside, queuing up to get their photographs taken out outside the local takeaway, Jobby Liquor.
And the guy said, I didn't know. He said at first he thought they were taking the mickey, but everyone was howling. Anyway,
you know.
It's been, and so Miami, you better be prepared. And the bad news for Boston is our friends from south of the border are about to descend upon you. You will see a difference, ladies and gentlemen. You were warned. Be ready for it. Don't think you're going to get the same kind of banter. But anyway, till we see you again, may you and yours, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.